The following contains footage of a T-rated game. Some viewer discretion is advised.
It seems like all I've really been doing so far are a bunch of really well-known games that everyone already knows about. I think it's time I looked into some more obscure territory. That's why today we're going to be taking a look at Edna and Harvey the Breakout by Daedalic Entertainment. This game is a point-and-click adventure game. Pretty standard as far as they go. Is there anything that stands out about it? Well, you'll just have to watch the video now, won't you?
You play as the titular Edna, and to a lesser extent, her plush bunny Harvey. I think Harvey is supposed to be one of those characters where it's ambiguous as to whether or not he's actually alive, or if he's supposed to be a projection of Edna's subconscious, and it leaves you wondering throughout the whole game on—
Just remember, I'm a projection of your subconscious.
Oh. I guess that sells that. Guess I was wrong.
Nobody's perfect.
Aw. Thanks, Edna.
So we start off in solitary confinement. A chair randomly spawns out of nowhere, and we're now in control of our main protagonist. I'll escape in a moment, but first I have to ask, doesn't having a chair and table sort of defeat the purpose of all the padding? The padding is there so the mental patient in question can't bring harm to themselves, isn't it? Especially considering how easy it is to take this chair leg, turn it into a pointy thing, and then tear up the padding. Oh hey, a pointy thing that we can use to tear up the padding. One cool thing about this game is that you can hit the space bar in order to see what you can interact with. So how much padding is there for me to scratch up? Oh dear. So after scratching up the padding, I talk to the guy guarding the room, and convince him to turn on the AC. This reveals the air vent, so I scratch up some more, then I have to get the guy to turn the AC back off. This is probably one of the issues I had with the game. I know that point-and-click adventures are innately supposed to be about finding out what to do next, but I feel like this game goes a bit too far in that aspect. For example, you don't just ask the guy to turn the AC on and off, you have to first charm him into turning it on, then get him pissed so he turns it off to spite you. And there are so many different things to say to him, it'll take a bit of trial and error before you find out how. Probably one of the worst ones, however, was this part where you have to get a security guy to go to the bathroom by turning the lights on in all but 2 rooms, so that the screens spell out WC. Maybe I'm just not good at point-and-click adventure games, but I personally feel like that's reaching at least a little. So after discovering the vent area, we realize we can't unscrew the screws, and since we can't unscrew the screws, I guess we're screwed. Or we would be, if Harvey didn't inform us that we were at one point able to use a neat trick to unscrew the screws. So to help us remember, he uses this new ability known as tempo morphing, which allows us to venture into Edna's subconscious to retrieve forgotten memories. When this happens, we can play as Edna or Harvey. When playing as Harvey, we gather topics to discuss with Edna. One of these particular topics helps Edna to remember her previously mentioned ability to unscrew things. Not only do we get to discover this neat ability that lets us unscrew the vent, but we also get a bit of insight of Edna's backstory. I have to say, this makes for a really cool storytelling element. So how many times do we get to use this epic plot device? 3 times. So we crawl through the vent and find ourselves eavesdropping on 2 guys, one of them being our main antagonist, Dr. Marcel. Dr. Marcel reveals that apparently Edna's father was convicted of murdering a child. Edna can't believe this, and says that they need to clear her father's name. This plot point makes absolutely no sense. The game has made it quite clear that Edna has amnesia. If she doesn't remember anything about herself or her father, what makes her so certain he wasn't a murderer? So after this I find a polo mallet. I right click on it multiple times and Edna says some weird things.
A masterpiece. Made from the mineral of a meteorite that crashed here. It's a mineral that doesn't naturally exist on Earth. Forged in the lava of a volcano, the steel folded 1,000 times and cured in the swells of the sea. The metal is as elastic and flexible as an unspoiled blade of grass that flourishes on the highest peaks of the Andes.
After a bit, I realize that I'm supposed to use the pick up option. and this is a minor complaint I have with the game. Basically, you're given 4 options of how to interact with things. If you right click on an object, Edna performs an action on it by default. The problem is though that it doesn't always do what you'd expect it to do. For example, there are several objects that you can pick up by right clicking. Others, like the mallet, you have to use the pickup option. And this gets mildly annoying when you find out you're using the wrong action on an item. One cool thing about this though is that the devs designed it so Edna will react in different ways to most actions. She rarely gives a stock response like, "I don't see how that would help," or "That doesn't make any sense." She has a response to almost everything. You can talk to inanimate objects other than Harvey, try to pick up things that she obviously won't be able to pick up, try to combine things that obviously can't be combined, and these will usually yield different responses. You know how in humongous entertainment games you can click on stuff in order to find out what happens? It's kind of like that. You always find yourself messing around with things to see how Edna and sometimes Harvey will react. You can also use the pen, knife, scissors, and a few other things to vandalize things, which doesn't help you through the game, for the most part, but is good for some entertainment value. Overall, it's pretty neat. So we open up the door to find ourselves stopped by this guy. We use the mallet on him, and we're shown probably the greatest animation in a video game of all time. Okay, that was a bit of a cheap shot. The game's animation isn't terrible, it's just a bit stiff at times. And they talk in these sort of weird 4-frame cycles that doesn't really match what they say. I can forgive it though, since the game was originally created by a college student as a project, and for that, it's not bad. So now we make our way out of the room, and begin our daring escape. I think I'm just going to leave it here, since it'll kind of remove the purpose of actually playing the game if I go through the whole thing. So now let's talk about the game in general. For starters, the story. Save for that one plot hole, there does seem to be a decent narrative going on here, but it doesn't feel like it's fleshed out all that much. There's even a decent climax, but it doesn't really feel like it has an adequate build-up. There's sort of a shift in tone nearing the end of the game, but it doesn't feel very well transitioned. It just sort of changes from day to night. You know how one of my complaints with Half-Life 2 was how long it took between moments of exposition? It's kind of like that, but with less exposition. The game definitely focuses more on comedy than storytelling, and there's certainly nothing wrong with that, but they could have done both really well if they had just developed the story a bit more. Probably the best way they could have done this is by simply using the tempo morph feature a few more times. There's sort of this ongoing mystery of what happened to this boy Edna knew as a child, and each time we tempo morph we get a bit more insight into Edna's history with him and some other characters. And if it had been used a bit more, I feel like it would have been easier to get invested into the story. As a whole, the story isn't particularly bad, it just could have been better. As for the comedy, it's somewhat hit or miss. A lot of the comedy revolves around fourth wall jokes, at least that's what the majority of the humor seems to be about. The humor is mostly hit or miss. The game definitely got a few laughs out of me, but not always.
It is very tempting that this is exactly what such art is all about. The angrier I get at my own understanding of the need not to swipe the key, the deeper the genius of the work becomes. And the more I realize I can't take the key, the madder I get as a result.
Just to clarify, she won't take the master key because she thinks the whole point of the art is that it's supposed to piss her off. This isn't even something someone told her, this is her own interpretation, and because she feels so strongly about it, she refuses to take it. And getting the master key is one of the biggest plot points in the entire game. It requires a crap ton of traversing the entire facility just to make your own. Maybe I'm just being a spoil sport, but it is kind of hard to find this funny considering how frustrating it is. And then just to mock you even further, when you finally make it out of the facility, you can find a trash can filled with master keys, just to hammer in how pointless this crucial plot point is. Another issue is that the game suffers from a somewhat faulty English translation.
Who are you?
I am Mr. Frog, of course.
Strange name, that.
It is meant for a human.
The original line was supposed to be maybe for a human. If you can speak German, I actually recommend you play this game in German because not only does it fix a few translation errors, it also saves you from a bug. When messing around with this menu, if you pick up B-Man's order, you can't put it back or put any other order in its place. And you can't exit from this either. I literally had to Control-Alt-Delete my way out of this bug. And if you haven't saved in a while, you'll end up losing any progress you had up to this point. Yeah, just to let you know, if you want to play this game, you will have to put up with some technical difficulties. The most common one being that the game crashes a lot. And as a result, you'll have to save often. This doesn't exactly ruin the game, it is something the player can put up with, but it isn't something the player should have to put up with. You can avoid it by not picking up the B-Man's order and just replace it with what you need to solve the puzzle, but you're obviously not going to know that until you encounter the bug for the first time, and the only other option is to play in German. And there's also an annoying glitch where the ending credits, as well as an epilogue detailing what a few of the characters went through after the game, won't show up for no real reason. And granted, it doesn't affect the game as much as the story, but it's still really annoying. I think most of us can agree that something like this should have been fixed. But ignoring technical difficulties, the game actually runs surprisingly well. Even while recording, I experienced no real frame rate drops. At worst, it made each screen take a bit longer to load, and even then it's barely noticeable. So overall, the game's not too shabby, especially considering the entire thing was designed as a college project. It's far from perfect, like I said, the game crashes way more than it should, and the dub can come off as a bit awkward. And being a point-and-click adventure, there's not really much you can do to make it stand out unless you have a really good story, a high nostalgic appeal, or in some cases a good horror tenor. And you'll probably end up needing or at least wanting a guide at some point, unless you're smarter than me, which isn't too far out of the realm of plausibility. But if you're a fan of point-and-click adventures and can put up with some technical difficulties, this game may be worth your time. So until next time, see ya!